It's got to be Sam Bradford, and people just have this. Somehow they just don't see the Sam Bradford as that good of an upgraded quarterback, and yet I keep pointing out that when the last time he was under center in St. Louis in 2013, when he played, I think he made it to Week 7. He finished 5th and 6th in the league in the two categories that measure downfield passing production. When you throw it, when you're trying to stretch the ball downfield, and he did this with a wide receiver group that included Tavon Austin, Austin Pettis, Chris Givens, Brian Quick, and he had Jared Cook and Lance Kendricks as his tight ends. I mean, that's a pedestrian group. Now he's going to a Chip Kelly offense that will give him fantastic opportunities of play-action passing. They've had terrific numbers the last 2 seasons in that category, and he's got a wide receiving core and tight end core that's arguably even better than what he had over in St. Louis. So this is a guy who could already give you top 5 numbers with bad talent around him. You give him good talent, and you keep him healthy for a season, and the Eagles can do that with their offensive line because a couple of years ago they were best in pass protection in ESPN's pass protection metric. You do that, and it's going to move the quarterback from where it was last year to top 10 caliber, and that's the kind of difference. They can move from 10 wins, to 12 wins and give it the division win.
Yeah, we saw Foles struggle throwing the ball down the field. We also saw Sanchez struggle with that. He didn't really even take any shots. You wonder how much of that was him being injured. Is Bradford an upgrade over Sanchez as well?
Yeah, definitely. He especially is an upgrade in the bad decision rate metric I have. That measures how often the quarterback makes a mental error that leads to a turnover opportunity for the opposing team. Sanchez posted 2.6% rate. It's a very high, near bottom of the league rate. And Bradford, the last 2 times he's played in the season, he posted a 0.7% rate, which is that's top 10, maybe top 5 caliber a number, and they did a 1.7%, which is a middle of the road number. So he's going to be able to cut down the interceptions because the Eagles threw more interceptions last year than they did. They had 21 picks. Bradford's going to be able to cut that down. He might be able to cut that in half.
Casey Joyner is with us here, ESPN.com, NFL Insider. He says the Eagles have surpassed the Cowboys. One reason is Sam Bradford, an upgrade. But what about the running game? They lose McCoy, the 2013 rushing champion. They add the 2014 rushing champion in DeMarco Murray plus Ryan Matthews. How good is the Eagles' rushing attack going to be? They already had a pretty good one. Will it be better?
I think it will. Mind you, last year they had 7 different offensive line combinations, and they still ranked 3rd in a metric I have called good blocking rate. And that measures how often an offensive line gives its running backs quality run blocking, which basically means you don't allow the defense to disrupt rushing attempts. You place 3rd in the league when you're rotating. You've got 7 offensive line combinations, and they didn't want 7 offensive line combinations. That was by necessity. Just shows you how good Chip Kelly's system is at giving people good blocking. And you got to consider a few things with the core they have at running back now. DeMarco Murray does it very well in the metric I have called good blocking yards per attempt. He had 8.9 yards per attempt, which is a very high number there. But most importantly, he did that on 160 carries, and that means that he can give you top quality productivity on his first carry and on his 250th carry. Let's say he doesn't get to 300 this year, so they kind of cap him off. He can give you top quality production all the way through. What makes it even better for the Eagles, though, is that they've got Ryan Matthews, who had a 9.9 yard number in that metric last year, which is a very high number. In fact, it would have ranked 2nd in the league had he posted enough carries to qualify. And they also have Darren Sproles, who had an 11-yard blocking yards per attempt rate last year. So they've got 3 guys who can serve as breakaway threats.
Where does a guy like, LaShawn McCoy fall in that? Because a lot of he made a lot out of nothing. So, people look at him and say, wow, you gave up this dynamic player. The flip side of that would be, I always say Chip Kelly rather have 2nd and 7 than 2nd and 13. He doesn't care if you just get 3 yards. Let's go back to the huddle and try again, but don't make me lose yardage. Was McCoy a guy who did not excel in that area?
He's excelled in it in the past. It's not like he's been a home run hitter in the past, but last year wasn't his best season in that metric. Last year, LaShawn McCoy had an 8.3-yard number in good blocking yards per attempt that ranked tied for 20th. So he wasn't a guy who, you're right in that he seems to be the sort of guy who wants to hit home runs all the time, and that's not what Chip Kelly wants. Chip Kelly wants the home runs, but what he wants, like you said, he doesn't want 2nd and 12. He wants 2nd and 7. And if you give him a home run, that's great, but he really wants to avoid that 2nd and 12 situation because when you get to 2nd and 12, now you have to pass. And the thing that makes Chip Kelly's passing game work so well is that you don't know, when he's going to pass. He really wants to avoid that situation where he's in a pass-first situation. He wants to make you respect the run. That's why the Eagles are so good at play-action passing, because you always have to respect the running game. But, yeah, so McCoy he's still a good back, but he didn't do as well as any of these backs did last year.
Casey, let's talk a little bit more. I think everybody knows Murray, especially here. We saw a lot of him over the last couple of years with Dallas. He was the rushing champion last year. But we don't know as much about Ryan Matthews other than he's always hurt. How will him playing in this offense and not having to be the main ball carrier help him out?
I'm looking at it as you're probably going to have about 500 carries to distribute to your running backs if you're in a run-heavy offense, because you're going to have some you're going to have for you're going to go to your quarterbacks. You're going to have some for kneel downs, end arounds, trick plays, things of that nature. So you're probably going to give about 500 to your running backs. If you get three guys like the Eagles have, let's say you can give Sproles anywhere between 50 and 100, you're talking 400 to 450 carries that you have to distribute between Murray and Matthews. So, you split it up any way you want and get 250, 200, and let's say it's only 400 carries between them. You could go, you go 250, 150, you go 200, 200, 225, 175. None of those aren't the caliber of numbers that tend to wear backs down. Like if you said DeMarco Murray's going to have 225 carries this year and Ryan Matthews is going to have 175, I don't think most people are going to look at that and go, oh, well, those guys aren't going to make it through the season. They're going to go, oh, well, geez, Ryan Matthews is only going to get 8 to 10 carries a game. That's about it. Great, he can live with that. I think that's what it is. When you build this kind of depth, you don't have to think about wearing any of your backs down, because the concern about Murray is that he's never really had the kind of season he had before last season. He didn't in college, but in the pros he'd always been like, oh, he last an entire season. I think Kelly understands that and says, look, I don't want him to last an entire season trying to give him 400 carries. I want to have him last an entire season giving him, say, 250 carries and keep him fresh, because, I think Kelly's also looking at it from, we don't want to just play 16 games. We want to play in that next week and play 17, 18, and 19 games this year too. When you
do your metrics and break down teams, do you break down Philadelphia's running game different than others?
Not really. It's just in the sense if you're giving quality blocking and things, that's really the things that I'm looking for. One of the things that you get with Philadelphia is that the other team is going to put more people in the box. They're going to have an extra defender in the box than they are with other teams. And a lot of times people look at that and say, oh, that's automatically a negative for the offense. It's only negative for the offense if the defense can make that extra guy. They can get him free and get him to disrupt the play. If they bring that extra guy in the box and it doesn't disrupt the play, it's a negative for the defense, because now you brought this extra guy in there and the offense is still giving the guy good blocking. That's the kind of thing that Philadelphia can do on offense, and that's I don't grade them differently, but I know the defenses attack them differently. Let's say.
Casey says they have the makings of one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. They have Murray and Matthews, and don't forget Sproles in there as well. All right, we know their offense can score regardless of really who plays. I think a lot of people have confidence in that, regardless of the personnel. But on that defensive side of the ball, the pass defense, a nightmare. Is it much improved?
Well, they added a ton of players. They added 6 cornerbacks to the roster. And, some of them I think are going to be some personnel upgrades. Like you get ranked 6th in the league in a metric I have called yards per attempt, measures so often, or how many yards a quarterback gives up when you throw a pass in his direction. So they can do well in that metric. But I think their biggest issue is they just need to have their players. There's a saying in defense that your players need to be where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. You guys are supposed to. You don't want guys out of position, because that's when you give up really big plays. And that's what happened a lot to the Eagles last year. Last year they had 22 plays on defense where a defensive player made a significant coverage error, and I'm talking completely out of position, leaving a receiver uncovered. A defender falls down. Things of that caliber. We're not talking like a defender just a receiver gives him a move and it gets open by a step or so. We're talking about leaving receivers completely uncovered. They gave up 489 yards and 10 touchdowns on those plays. 10 touchdowns on those plays. Every team is going to give up some. You can keep that number if you're a good defense down around, say, 3 touchdowns. If you're doing a really good job. So I think the Eagles will concentrate as much on, we've got personnel upgrades, but as long as we can get our guys to be where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, they ought to be able to cut some of those numbers close to at least in half. And if you do that, you're adding 5 touchdowns and 300 yards, I think that's going to add another win or two to the ledger at the end of the season.
ESPN.com NFL insider Casey Joyner, 100 days away from the NFL season beginning. How about Walter Thurman playing safety? I don't know what people look at, making a change and going from corner to safety, but he's a guy who's been banged up a lot. But does he have the qualities, in your opinion, to go from corner to safety?
He's big enough. He's physical enough to where if you put him in the box, he can go disrupt the running play. That's really good, and we know he can cover. And I think the Eagles probably look at it as a standpoint as well as anymore. Your nickel cornerback tends to be a starting cornerback. And a lot of times, one of your safeties, the teams are going to go 4 wide receiver sets against you. You're going to have your safety playing cornerback. So you can't think of a safety just as a guy who, he needs to be a guy who can play in the box or play center field. You really need a guy you could say, hey, if we need to, put him in a one-on-one situation, he can go cover somebody. And Thurman can do that. So I like the move. I mean, I think it makes a better use of his skill set, or at least it makes, it does something different with him that's going to maybe, not just leave him out on that island all the time and let him do some things at safety that he didn't do at cornerback.
I'm interested because Rowe played safety in college. They're moving, and I know he played corner as well, but he's going to go play corner in the NFL, and Thurman played more corner, and now they're going to move him to safety. Would they be better off playing Thurman at corner and Rowe at safety?
You would think, but I think they see some things in Thurman's game. I think they see some things because he's been a hit or miss cornerback. And there have been times when he's looked very good in coverage, and there's times that he's been more of a not to say coverage liability where he's had some issues though. And I think they're saying we'd like to use your ball hawking skills. We'd like to allow you to do some of the things that you do there, and also but also get you out on an island sometimes. I think they're trying to find the best of both worlds there. And I think that if you find a safety who you think has coverage skills they can move in the cornerback, I think you want to at least give him a try on that. I think, let's put it this way, I think they know what Thurman could do at corner and say, we know where you're at. We need to move you to safety because we think it's going to be better use of your skills. We're not sure if this guy can play corner or not, so we want to give him a chance. I like it because at least it gives it a try to get these guys to do different things.
Yeah, we'll see who plays safety next to Malcolm Jenkins. So far, it looks like it's been Walter Thurman getting the first crack. You got Earl Wolf there, and then really just a bunch of – Jalen Watkins moved from corner to safety. They got Chris Maragos, a special teams guy. They didn't really focus on that safety spot. I guess Thurman to them was the answer. So we'll see what kind of competition they have in that secondary here. Now, we talked about Murray coming to Philadelphia. On the flip side, one of the reasons you like Philadelphia is because Dallas may not be able to lean on their running game as much. Now, is it Murray or that line? A lot of people think, you can just plug and play a running back and that line will get the job done. Will Dallas be able to lean on the rushing game as much this year?
I agree in that usually the running games come down to blocking, and if you give a running back good blocking, he's going to get good productivity, and that's a very good rule of thumb. And even Jim Finks, the old general manager for the Bears, he said that about even Walter Payton. He said, we have to give him good blocking in order for him to be productive. So if you have to give Walter good blocking back in the day, if that's the general rule for Walter, then it applies for everybody. But here's the thing about the Cowboys offensive line: they finished 5th last season in my good blocking rate metric. 5th. They're good, really good, but they're not first. They're not the best. You can't put their running backs into situations where they're not getting good blocking, even as good as the Cowboys offensive line was. So I think the Cowboys offensive line is very good, but now you're looking at a running back core that includes Darren McFadden, Joseph Randall, Lance Dunbar, and Ryan Williams. The thing about McFadden is, he didn't have very good blocking last year, and he only got 6.9 yards per attempt in good blocking plays. But he's been that bad in that metric for many years. In fact, over the last three seasons, he's next to last in the league in yards per carry. It's not just blocking for McFadden. He's just not getting home runs even when you give him good blocking. And when you're looking at Randall, Dunbar, and Williams, between those three, they have a combined 243 career carries. 243 between them. So none of those guys has proven that they can be the back. McFadden, you have question marks about. So if they lose some productivity there, it's going to take their passing game and what they did for their entire team, because their running game predicated everything they did. It kept them kept Romo from taking risky passes downfield. It protected their defense. It wore the other team down. It had a really big impact on that team. So if this running game even takes just one step back, let's not say they're going to be like an average running game, but let's say just take one step back over where they were last year, I think it changes a lot of things for the Cowboys.
Casey Joyner is with us, ESPN.com NFL Insider. He says the Eagles are the NFC East favorites. What is the bottom line overall when you look at these two teams? We just talked about some of the areas, but overall, bottom line, why is Philadelphia the better team?
I think Philadelphia is a better team because they're going to be able to take what they did last year, those 10 wins that they got, and they're going to be able to build. If that running game isn't what it was last season, I think that they are going to drop a couple of games. In fact, I also think they're going to get a couple more shootouts than they did last year because you look at the wide receivers they're going to face and they look at the tight ends they're going to face, and they've got, believe me, they've got a murderer's row of teams they're going up against as far as, top receivers. I think that all of those things are going to contribute to the Cowboys losing another game or two. I still think they're going to be a good team. I still think they're probably going to go 10-6, maybe 11-5, but I think that's about where their ceiling is this year. And I think the Eagles, they go 10-6 last year, and they make a bunch of improvements. You just add another win or two, I think it gets them to 11-5 and 12-6. So I think where the teams were last year win-wise, I think those totals will be probably flipped, and I think Philadelphia probably gets 12 wins, maybe 11, and Dallas ends up with 10. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them both make the playoffs. I just happen to think the Eagles are going to be a team that has another victory than the Cowboys, and they're going to win that division.
Well, one question I guess would be that we didn't really touch on is Dallas defense entering last year. A lot of people were saying they were going to be historically bad. I think they played over their head. Are they going to be a better defense than they were last year?
Not if you get into shootouts. That's the thing. The Cowboys avoided shootouts last year. That's when you've got that kind of a defense and you can avoid a shootout, you're going to do okay. But the Cowboys are going to get, I think, in a lot more shootouts. You look at who they faced this year, wide receiver-wise. A couple games against Odell Beckham. They get a couple of games against Deshaun Jackson. They're going to face Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Vincent Jackson, Kelvin Benjamin, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb. They're going to face Brandon Marshall. They're going to face Sammy Watkins. They got Jimmy Graham. They got Rob Gronkowski against them. I mean, they're going to be facing some teams that are going to be able to test that defense in a lot of ways. And if the running game takes any kind of a step back, now Romo's going to be asked to throw the ball more often. And we know Romo, he did really well in bad decision rate last year, but in the past he may have a good season, but he's always going to have a game or two, maybe three, where he just turns into Tony Romo and suddenly forces 6 passes in the coverage or something. He just goes crazy. So you're going to have situations like that are going to take the Cowboys away from where they were. I just look at what they did last year, Dallas, and say that's about as good of a run as you could get for that team. And as much as they've improved in a lot of ways, I still think that if things go perfect, they go 12-4. But if they have anything happen, if they get injuries up front or any of these things we've been talking about impact them negatively, I think that's going to get them down from 12 wins down to, say, 10 wins. And that makes all the difference in the world.
It's very interesting because, you look at, we were just talking before you jumped on in the last hour, kind of going, unit by unit, is Romo a check mark over Bradford?
I would still say yeah, probably.
And then the offensive line, Philly or Dallas?
Well, he had a better good blocking rate last year. I'd call it a push.
All right. Then I look at tight end. You got Witten against Selleck and Ertz. Now, I think Ertz is going to break out this year and have a much better year. Is Witten on the downside?
Witten's on the downside, and look what the Eagles did in Week 16 last year when throwing to the tight end. I think the Eagles get the check mark there.
All right. Wide receiver, I think Bryant by himself probably beats all 4 of the Eagles wideouts.
Yep, he does.
And in the running game, I guess you go Philly, and then you look on that defensive side of the ball. I don't know. Neither one of them have a standout player on that defense. I know you like Maxwell a lot. Do you like him better than anybody in the Dallas secondary?
Probably not. But again, I think if you take the Eagles, let's put it this way: if you take the Eagles' issues they had last year with blowing coverages, and you take those out or take some of them out, you reduce that number down. And say, okay, now go against the Cowboys, I think they'll do just. But if you just said both of these teams have to rely on their talent on defense, I think the Cowboys are probably a step better, but I don't think they're a lot better. I think maybe in front 7 they're better, but I don't think they're a ton better, and I think they have some big weaknesses. And let's not forget special teams, too. Eagles are the best special teams in the NFL last year.
That's true. And real quick, I know that you did the research between Philly and Dallas. How far off is New York?
Not far. Not far. Beckham Jr., it depends on if he can do what he did last year over the course of a whole season. It makes a huge difference for that team, but that's a big question mark to keep up that kind of production because I think he's great, but I think there are a couple of things that they could point towards him coming back down to earth. But if he plays like that over a 16-game season, then yeah, they're in the running. If he doesn't, though, then I'd say that they're still a step behind. They're an 8-8 team.
ESPN.com NFL insider Casey Joyner, 100 days away from the NFL season. I don't know that if you saw Peter King's MMQB power rankings, he had Philadelphia at 7. He had Dallas at 13. I was surprised for Philly being that high, but it sounds like people like Philly. It sounds like this is not a crazy thought to say, hey, Philadelphia is a better team. But he had Minnesota at 6, Kansas City at 4, and Baltimore at 1. Baltimore, the best team in the NFL for you?
I think Joe Flacco takes a step forward to being elite this year. I've taken a lot of grief from Joe Flacco haters on that one because what Trestman can do. Trestman can turn that offense into something a whole lot better. He worked some wonders in Chicago, maybe more than people think he did. But I don't know. I wouldn't have them number 1, no. But to say that they've taken some steps forward of what Trestman's going to do to that offense, yeah, I definitely like that. And I think the Vikings make the playoffs too.
All right, Casey Joyner, all football season long. We're 100 days away from the kickoff of the NFL season. He's got Philly over Dallas. Text ESPN and your thoughts to the number 89,000 on the Harbor Pines Golf Club text board. Who do you have, Philly or Dallas? Let us know. Coming up, we'll have more on that. Casey, always a pleasure, my man. We'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Appreciate it.